talk how to set up your workspace to paint. So first of all, I have my paintbrushes here, and paintbrushes come in quite a few different shapes, but the two main ones are rounds and flats. And literally, if you look at this brush, it's round, and if you look at this brush, it's flat. So that's kind of common sense. From there, we sort these out by rounds and flats. So all these guys are flats, and all of these are rounds, all right? Then they have a number on them. So if I look at this one says number 10, this says 12, 8, all right? And then once you get larger, then it's in inches. So this is a 3-inch brush. So this is the big guy, all right? But the bigger the number, the bigger the brush. So my largest flat is the 12, which is right here, all right? And my smallest one in my hand is 4. So you get the idea that, bigger numbers are bigger brushes. Same thing works with the rounds. My small guy here is a 3, and my big one is a 10. The other characteristics of brushes are that they come with bristles, that's this part, that are made out of different materials. And you can probably see how they look different. These two are squirrel hair, right? They work really well for watercolor because the squirrel hair holds the water, especially this round one. I mean, it looks like a mop and it acts like a mop. And a lot of times rounds are preferred for watercolor because they do hold more. And the flats are more for oil and acrylic paint because this works like a shovel and you can pick up the heavy bodied paint and be able to put it on your canvas. This guy here with these really stiff white ones, this is actually hog hair. These are usually underpainting brushes and they add a lot of texture. So hog hair has its uses as well. The ones that most students use are a synthetic. These are natural, right? Squirrel and hog happen naturally. And then these are synthetic, or they're man-made. These particular ones are considered golden Taclon, which is kind of a fine plastic material used to create those individual bristles. So now let's step back for just a second and talk the anatomy of a brush. We already established that these are the bristles, and I'd like to think you already know that this is the handle. But this little metal piece that holds the two together is called the ferrule. And the ferrule does just what I said. It holds the bristles onto the handle. And when you're painting, it's important to try to remember, and this will show up better if I use a smaller round one, to try not to get paint buildup around this ferrule, because the paint buildup will actually split your bristles and then you won't have that nice point to use in the future. Other painting equipment, and then these brushes, actually, I'm going to keep them above my workspace so that they're handy and out of the way. And this is a palette knife, which is sometimes used for mixing paint, scooping and mixing paint. You can see how it would work. I'm not actually going to demonstrate this because I'm just going to show you how to use your brush. And then some kind of palette. If you're going to use watercolor, it comes in these handy little boxes, these pans. That works as a palette, or if you're going to use something like an acrylic paint, you can use just about anything for a palette. They have these nice little guys with the lid. You can also just use like a paper plate and put your paint onto it and use that instead. So there's your palette. Now I am right-handed. So if you're left-handed, you would work on the left side, right? But since I'm right-handed, all of my equipment is going to go on this right side because I don't want to reach across wet paint. See where my sleeve would be if this was paint? I don't want to reach across that wet paint and make a mess. So my brushes are up here, my paint is to the right. I also have a cup of water for washing brushes, and I will put that above my paint. I'm going to set it on a paper towel for blotting purposes. So we'll put this right up here, all right? And now here is my painting workspace. The other thing you might want to consider is perhaps you want to roll up your sleeves so that you don't get them in the paint. You can also think like violet on Disney's The Incredibles, where she had a force field. And slide yourself away from the desk so that you're not leaning over your wet paint. In order to make a neat and tidy painting, I need to be able to keep the paint where I want it. So let's talk about how to paint inside the lines. And I know that sounds kind of silly to some people, but it is really the first thing that you have to learn. All right, I like to wet my brush first. And whenever you're working in the water, you want to dab it on the bottom and wipe it on the edge. No tappy tappy, because this throws water all over the place, and especially if there was paint in this water, you'd have painted speckles everywhere. So dab it on the bottom, make sure that paint is not gathering on the ferrule, wipe it on the edge, dry it off a little bit, and then you can work into your paint. So this is a flat brush, so I'm just going to scoop some paint up like a shovel. And notice that it's at the tip of my bristles and not up by the ferrule. I'm also holding my brush just like I held my pencil. Now I'm going to come down to this, and if I want this to be blue, I'm going to push the paint to the edge. So I'm going to work out to the edge. Push it right to the edge, make nice clean lines. Okay. Now, when I get over to this side, get some more paint there. All right, if I have my brush here, where's all the paint? All the paint is on the wrong side of the line. So I either need to turn my brush so that I'm still pushing it to the edge, or turn my paper around so that I'm pushing it to the edge. In this case, I will just work this way, right? And you're going to make sure that you use enough paint to cover the paper. See how if I do this, the paint runs out of my bristles and now it's not covering the paper. Sometimes maybe you want that, but you also need to make sure that it's on purpose and not just an accident because you ran out of paint. So push that to the edge and fill in the space. So the first thing you need to be able to do is fill in that space, nice and solid color, just like that, okay? The other thing that you want to practice is the pressure that you push on the brush. So if I just touch the tip of these bristles, I'd get a thin line, but if I push harder, more pressure, makes a thicker line. All right, and you're gonna also find that the flat brushes will make different marks than the round brushes. So now I have a round brush and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna start with real light pressure, and the more I push on it, the heavier the line gets. Being able to control the lines and keep the paint inside the areas that you want are going to be basic survival skills for creating a painting. Remember, when you're cleaning your brushes, you're going to dab it on the bottom. Make sure the paint's off of the bristles and also cleaned by the ferrule. Wipe it on the edge, dry it off. So I'm going to repeat that process with this flat one that I had dirtied. Make sure it's all clean. Wipe it on the edge, dry it off. Now, the last step, so when you're finished for the day for painting, you want to put the edges back on these brushes so that their hair dries correctly. And you're going to use 3 fingers for a round. Pull it right out like this to put the tip back on, and 2 fingers for a flat to pinch it, to put that flat edge back on. And just like your own hair, it's bad if the brushes soak in the water. It's not good for your hair to swim all the time. But it's also, the way it dries is the way it will stay. So make sure you put those points back on your brushes when you're finished.